Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the October 2023 member of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. My name is Alan Bowser. I'm currently the president of Civic Fed. Thank you all for joining us. I think we're going to have an exciting program this evening. We're going to take care of some Federation business before we get on to our discussion this evening with Chairman Harris and Director Stern. The first order of business is to approve the agenda, which you can find on page 2 of the newsletter that's been circulated. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second? It's been first and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I guess I asked you all to mute. I asked you all to mute so you can wave your hand wildly. The second order of business is to approve the minutes from the September 11th, 2023 general meeting. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the general meeting, which is on page 15 of the newsletter. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
It's been first and seconded to approve the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm going to move the minutes are approved. Next order of business is to receive the treasurer's report, and I'll ask our treasurer, Jerry Garson, to make that presentation.
This Montgomery County Civic Federation operates on a fiscal year starting July 1st. And for the first 3 months, we've gotten $1,330 worth of dues. Our expenses were $777.75. So we have a net income for the period of $552, and our cash balance is $8,054. We've had no expenses since our last meeting.
Thank you for that, Jerry. Is your television on?
No.
Okay, somebody have the television on the background. Can you please turn it off, please? Everybody.
I like to give the budget report for the year that we'll have to approve. We have revenues of $2,150 from dues, $500 from the awards dinner, giving us total revenues of $2,650. We have a post office. We have expenses of we think the same amount of $2,650, made up of post office box on 190, website of 600, Federation meetings of 50, awards dinner of 500. Offices, supplies, and support of 300, committee expenses of 50, memberships of 300, and insurance of $650, and miscellaneous of $10, giving us total expenses of $2,650. And we expect to have a bank balance of about $8,000 at the end of the period.
Thank you. Did you want to make a motion to approve the budget?
I make a motion to approve.
Was it seconded?
Second.
It's been first and seconded to approve the budget. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye, or raise your hand.
Well, thank you very much. The budget is approved. Now, somebody's got their television on. Please turn it off. It's not going to be helpful. Sounds like it was in your house, Mr. Garson, but we're okay now. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. I'd like to turn the program over to our Vice President, Elizabeth Joyce, who is going to moderate the discussion this evening. We are awaiting, I believe, if the chairman is not on here yet, he should be here soon, but we can talk. Director Stern, should we wait for the chairman? He was going to go first.
Yes, he was. And I do have a pop-up that says there are people who are in the waiting room. So I don't know if he was one of those individuals.
Okay, that's good. I've just admitted everybody. So that's going to bounce us up to a nice little number, 41. And he was not one of those. So he'll come
Okay.
back. He'll come back in a second.
Okay.
And in the meantime, we'll ask if anybody has any announcements they'd like to make for the rest of us on the Zoom. I can say that we are going to host a Safe Silver Spring meeting on Wednesday at 7:30 with the commander and lieutenants of the 3rd District in Silver Spring. You can find login information on the Safe Silver Spring Facebook page, or you can email me separately to join us. It's always a very helpful conversation where the police share information about what they're doing, and people in the community get to ask questions of the police. It's been good. Otherwise, our Civic Association, where are you, Jackie? Our Civic Association is going to have an ice cream social at Nolte Park next Sunday from I think 1:30 to 3:30. You're all welcome to come have ice cream and shaved ice with the Park Hills Civic Association. One of the way that we engage the community. Jackie, where are you?
Sorry, I
see you.
Frozen here. I have to come back in again.
No, I see you. Just wanted to make you a co-host again. And Chairman Harris. Don't see.
I can invite everyone to the traditional annual lantern walk that we have here between Littonsville and North Woodside, Rosemary Hills and Rock Creek Forest. As you know, the old bridge was taken down to make space for the Purple Line, and in taking that bridge down, which for many years divided our neighborhood from North Woodside, became an instrument of reconciliation. And as a result of the bridge coming down and both of us wanting the bridge and not wanting to see it destroyed, after it was taken down, well, before it was taken down, we used to have a meeting on the bridge, a candlelight service, just to say hello and to be thankful for each other as neighbors. And after it was taken down, North Woodside had to walk around half a mile to get into the area here. And we're hoping we can maybe go up on the bridge at some point this year in November. But anyway, the Lantern Walk will be November 11th and 12th. Rain date is 12th. And we hope that you'll get an announcement that you would come and join us as the two neighborhoods meet together by candlelight, by lanterns.
And we appreciate that announcement, Pat Tyson and the Littonsville Neighborhood Community Association. Chairman Harris has joined us.
Oh, good.
And we're going to turn the program over to Liz and ask her to take it away.
Okay. Well, first of all, we are grateful and honored to welcome Montgomery County's new Planning Board Chair, Artie Harris, to our meeting this evening. His distinguished resume includes master's degrees in both civil engineering and business administration, and an amazing background with nonprofits and private builders. Before his appointment as Planning Board Chair, he was the Vice President of Real Estate at Montgomery Housing Partnership, a nonprofit real estate development organization based in Silver Spring, Maryland, where, of course, many of us live, and that creates affordable communities in Montgomery County and surrounding jurisdictions. Previously, Mr. Harris was Vice President of Bozzuto Development Company, where he led teams developing market rate and mixed income housing projects across the Washington, D.C. region and beyond. He has 30 years experience developing multifamily housing and rental facilities, and an additional 9 years of experience as a civil engineer, managing design and construction projects for commercial, high-rise and industrial buildings and power plants. He brings such an impressive background, and we are genuinely thrilled to have you here tonight, Mr. Harris. He's going to share his vision for the planning board and just tell us whatever he wants to share with us about what he's thinking and doing right now. So please start. Thank you.
You are muted, Mr. Harris.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Liz. And it's my pleasure to be here tonight. And I'm also here with our acting planning director, Tanya Stern, who will talk a little bit after mine. I want to tee up this presentation. So if you can allow me to share this, I'd greatly appreciate that.
You should be able to share.
Yeah. So I'm going to slideshow and let me see at the bottom here.
Share screen. The green button that says share screen.
Yeah, let me. Okay, share screen. How's
There you
that?
go.
Can you see it? Okay.
Perfecto.
Yeah, great. So I'm gonna. I was going to talk a little bit about myself, but Liz stole my thunder. And then, but I will talk a little bit about the new planning board, which I'm so proud to be part of. And then about our initiatives as a planning board, some of the key initiatives that we're really excited about moving forward with, and then talk about Montgomery Parks. And then I'll turn it over to Acting Director Stern, and she'll talk about her planning initiatives. And then after that, we'll have a question and answer session. So let me just go to the next slide here. Yeah. So can you see that? Okay, full slide. Yeah. So
Yes.
Liz talked all about me, and just I won't repeat this, but my wife and I moved here 23 years ago, and we moved here from Chicago in a town called Oak Park. And similar to many of the communities around here, it's a well-educated community, diverse community, within walking of a downtown area and of their own metro life. So it's just a pleasure to be here. My wife's family is from Annapolis, so we're near her family, and we just love our community. So also, as I said before, the board, the council appointed just a great board, in my opinion, a very diverse board, and all the board members are so excited about implementing thriving, creating a great environment for all that live in the county and all that will eventually live in the county. So you met many of them. Sean Bartley on the left, Josh Linden. Sean's an attorney. Josh is is a transportation planning specialist. And then on my right is Vice Chair Mitra Petuam, who's got a lot of county experience. She worked with the Parks Department for many years, decades, and then she also ran the DPS for a while. And then there's James Hedrick, who's got a great finance background and also a great advocate for affordable housing. And like executive director was a nonprofit with housing in the Rockville area. So just a great board. I'd like to highlight 4 of our initiatives. What we are really want to do is accelerate housing production in the county, all housing types, especially affordable housing. And our big goal is to implement Thrive Montgomery 2050. Tanya talked a bit more about that. And the key pillars of Thrive, which we're so excited about, is community equity, environmental resilience, and economic health. And this board will also be focusing more on regional coordination. It's not just we live in a vacuum. We have neighbors that we need to partner with in order to create a great county to deal with traffic, also deal with business development. We're so excited. It's taken a long time to come, but we're so excited when the Purple Line is completed, because that's really a regional coordination project. And then I will talk a little bit about more, but we want to continue to support our nationally renowned park system. I'll give some examples of why this park system is so great and how we really want to support that, because it's a great system for our families, and also talk about Montgomery parks in general. And then the last is about economic development. It's our commitment to spur economic development, not only from small businesses, but also to attract internationally recognized bioscience companies. So those are our primary our goals as a board, and we're so excited about moving forward with those initiatives. One of the priorities is that it would help with creating more housing for all, and also doing our review process better in the planning side is a goal to accelerate the development review approval process. And this was we always are working on to be better and faster, so that if we're faster in getting projects approved, that means the developers can get their projects moving faster. That means we get more deals faster, we get more housing faster, we get more businesses faster, and then that creates more economic development, more taxing revenue for the county, and as well as providing housing for the county, and bringing more workers in the county. So that development review process, one part of it was generated by Delegate Lopez, and that process is about over. 22 recommendations came out of it to how the process can go faster. It's not just the planning department, it's also other county agencies like DPS and DOT. So it's like how can the whole process go faster? So there were 22 recommendations, some that are driven at the state level, others we can just do internally, some the council will have to have some input in. And then I want to just quickly talk about our wonderful park system. Every year the parks does highlights, they call it in their green tree report, all about the parks. And so just that you may know some of this, but it was a little eye-popping to me how large the park system is. We have over, we have 419 parks, over 37,000 acres of parkland that we own or manage. And just talking about some of the things that they do, there's 227 basketball courts. Now we have pickleball courts, which we didn't have maybe 10 years ago. A number of tennis courts, natural trails. We have, paved trails, athletic fields, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those later. But I don't know if you knew that we have a cricket court. We never had a cricket field, but we have like a legal-sized cricket field up in Germantown area. So the parks department are just doing so well in maintaining our parks, creating new parks, being innovative on types of we've switched to many of the parks now have grass fields where you used to have synthetic turf. So the park system is doing really well. And this is highlighting some of our parks projects. And I won't go through them all, but some of the Valera High School track field renovation, we oversee that park. We renovated that field. This Hillwood Manor neighborhood park is just completed. Some of these are on the left top is this Gene Lynch urban park in downtown Silver Spring. On the bottom left is we're doing more and more urban parks. So we bought this National Tire and Battery on East West Highway near Georgia about a year or so ago, and then that will be soon will be converted into an urban park. And then the one in the middle is a new at the Hillendale Park. That whole, if you drive up New Hampshire just north of the Beltway, that was just they did a total redo of the Hillendale Park and put in synthetic, grass turf there. It will open next month. There will be a ribbon cutting on that. And then we have this new frisbee type like golf frisbee kind of fields that some of the younger people wanted. So we're just doing more and more. There are some of the projects that are coming up. And then my first 4 months have been spent just going around meeting folks like you, going around the park system. The top one is a program that Parks does it's called our Trail Ambassador program, where in the summer they have kids, mainly high schoolers, 2 weeks that they teach them how to maintain the park so they can build up some love of the parks and continue to come. And at the end of this 2-week period, there's a graduation. One of them I attended, and all the kids got mountain bikes, and they're just ecstatic. But it wasn't so much about the mountain bikes they got a feel and love for the parks, and we hope they continue to come back. And then on the bottom right, I went out. It was a picnic area that celebrating community in Montgomery Park. I mean, in Montgomery County, and then in the middle there is this. The parks, you may not know this, but they have programs for people with disabilities. So this was a kayaking program teaching people with mental disabilities how to kayak, and going out, it was so much fun for them. And then the left is the board. So when I first came on, I said in my interview with council that within the first few weeks we'd have a retreat with the board. So we had a retreat. It's all about bonding and knowing each other better. So and I continue to go out, meeting with industry groups, meeting with developers, learning what their needs are, and community groups that have come and met with me. So I love this job, best job I've ever had. So if you want to connect with the board or with me, there's montgomeryplanning.org. Please go online and you'll learn more about when the board meetings are. You can go and watch a board meeting. You can watch them on demand. You can testify through that, sign up to testify. And if you want to email me, here's my email address at the bottom left. So that's a quick overview of the board, some of my initiatives, what we're planning, what we're focusing on this year, and in the years to come. So you can ask questions a little bit at the end of Tanya's if you like. Maybe that's the best way to do it, but it's your call.
Why don't we do both at the end? And
Okay.
I would, before I introduce Ms. Stern, I would suggest that everybody start putting your questions in the chat so I can anticipate what you'd like to know about and avoid redundancy. And we can just run through them after we hear from Ms. Stern. She is also a very impressive person. She is acting planning director for Montgomery County. She holds a master's degree in city planning from the University of Pennsylvania and is certified through the American Institute of Certified Planners, which, by the way, is a big deal, and is a certified public manager. Prior to this role, she served as deputy planning director, overseeing countywide housing policy, zoning, growth management, multimodal transportation planning, and historic preservation, and it goes on and on. Real estate, economic and demographic analysis, and it's just too overwhelming for the normal person to understand. She served as an advisor for Thrive Montgomery 2050 and the county's new general plan. And previously, she served for 14 years in the government of the District of Columbia in the DC Office of Planning as deputy director, overseeing neighborhood planning and urban design, and as chief of staff. And I bet that she will have some interesting insights about the differences between DC and Montgomery County go about planning, because I understand there's some really fascinating parallels and differences. So I'm going to let her present what she has to share with us, and we look forward to what you have to say. And thank you again so much for being with us.
Well, thank you all so much for this invitation to meet with you tonight. I really appreciate it. So I also have a presentation, so let me get this loaded. Can you see the full screen, or do you see the notes version?
You can see your notes.
Yeah, we see the news.
right, let me. Sorry, let me get out of this. Some of the features. Let me just
Yeah, well-
stop sharing for a second. See if I can get this up there. One more time.
This happens to us all the time. There you go.
All right.
Perfecto.
Okay, great. So again, really appreciate being able to meet with you all tonight. So let me just go ahead and jump into talking about how we plan equitably for the future at the planning department. So just a bit about the planning department. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with us. You know, actually, before I start, I definitely appreciate the introduction. You've heard a bit about my background, and also just wanted to note that my time in the district government, over 14 years, the last 8 of those was at the DC Office of Planning. But I also held other positions in district government in other agencies, and did a stint in the DC Department of Parks and Recreation. I worked in the mayor's office 2 times under 2 different mayors, and worked in another agency. And so I've been in a public sector part of my career for it'll be 20 years next year, and just really enjoy being able to serve the public, and I really enjoyed my time working in Montgomery County for the planning department and for the commission over these last 5 years. So again, just to talk a little bit about Montgomery planning, the planning department, you know, we focus on improving the quality of life for the county's diverse communities. That's sort of fundamentally what our mission is in all of our work. We seek to balance land use with transportation planning strategies. We also obviously review development applications so that we can provide strong recommendations to the planning board, and work very closely with the development community to make sure that the applications will result in projects that will serve the county's diverse communities into the future. We also provide updates to land use and zoning regulations. Another big piece of our work is conducting cutting edge research and a lot of data analysis, and I will talk a little bit about that later. And as noted earlier, we also house our county's historic preservation office. So one of the things that I say often is that at the planning department, we have a very robust work program. And what I mean by that is we have quite a number of projects underway. I want to start with our master plans. We have several master plans at various stages of development. 2 of them are, well, actually 1 on this list was just got a straw vote with the county council, but we have 2 currently in front of the county council. The pedestrian master plan, our countywide pedestrian master plan, which seeks to make walking and rolling for those who use mobility devices safe, attractive, and accessible for getting around the county. We also have the Fairland and Briggs Cheney master plan. That is just starting the council review process. They held their public hearing about a week or so ago. We are starting a planning board review of the Tacoma Park minor master plan amendment. And then we have 5 other master plans in various stages. The Great Seneca Plan, which includes a focus on our life sciences corridor, that has been underway for some time, as well as our University Boulevard corridor plan. That's focusing on University Boulevard, roughly just past the Wheaton CBD, stretching out to the Beltway. We also recently launched the Clarksburg Gateway Sector Plan, and then we have the Eastern Silver Spring Communities Plan. That's one of our newest master plans that's just about to kick off. And we're also just now kicking off the technical update to the master plan of highways and transitways. And just briefly for that one, a big focus will be completing the update to the street typologies that are now part of the Complete Streets Design Guide, which has now been incorporated into the road code for the county. And so we need to update this plan to reflect that as well. But we're doing even more. We have several other projects and studies underway. We're doing a shared streets guidelines project with jointly with MCDOT. as well as a bikeway branding project. We also just recently launched a Friendship Heights Urban Design Study. This is an area that hasn't had a new master plan in quite some time. But for now, what we want to do is just really look at how that area is used, what's the experience of residents in Friendship Heights, looking at urban design, how people use public spaces, public realm, transportation, things of that nature. So it isn't a master plan, it's an urban design study, but we want to use this to really get a better sense of what's happening on the ground. We are also launching the next quadrennial update to the growth and infrastructure policy. Now, we'll talk about that in a moment. Another project that we have underway, which is part of helping to implement Thrive, is creating implementation metrics, or actually more a tracking system, sort of a mechanism to track implementation. Thrive Montgomery 2050 has quite a number of metrics that are included in the adopted plan, but we need to create a framework and a mechanism to actually track that data. We are also doing another joint project with MCDOT, as well as the State Highway Administration, which is a coordinated data management study that's looking at focusing on transportation data. Another new project that we will be kicking off this fiscal year is our Germantown Employment Corridor check-in, as well as our Randolph Road Corridor study. Both of those are in areas that already have approved sector plans for a number of years ago, but it's an opportunity for us to go back and with the example of the Germantown Employment Corridor, literally checking in, looking at, what's the state of what's happening right now on the ground. Are there any new strategies or things that we should be looking at? And then for the Randolph Road Corridor study, that's particularly looking at the area around Randolph Road and Georgia Avenue, focusing on the Glenmont Metro Station area, and are there some strategies to help to spur future development around that area to take advantage of that transportation infrastructure. Another big focus is looking at pedestrian safety in that area as well. Another current project is our incentive zoning update, and I'll talk about that in a bit more, as well as two other ongoing projects, the Innovative Housing Toolkit and the Attainable Housing Strategies initiative, which I recall a number of you were involved in earlier. We did quite a bit of work on that with the previous board and put that on hold to get through Thrive Montgomery 2050. We're focusing on some other projects right now, so but we do hope to get back to that project in the near future. So again, we are just kicking off the 2024 update to the growth and infrastructure policy. Some of you may remember the subdivision staging policy. That's the previous name for what's now called the GIP, which is the new name that the council adopted during the last update in 2020. And this is essentially the policy that helps the board make sure that development proposals meet the adequate public facilities ordinance. And so there are a number of guidance and guidelines in the GIP that looks at how to evaluate transportation infrastructure, as well as school capacity and other types of infrastructure. For this update, like I said, we're just kicking it off. We just got the board's approval for the scope of work about a couple weeks or so ago. We're not looking at this point to make any major changes. We really want to look at the changes that were made in 2020, evaluate those to see, to make sure whether or not they've been effective, they're fair, they're equitable. We do want to make sure that the GIP is in alignment with the policies and the goals of Thrive Montgomery 2050. And as part of this project, we're also going to be analyzing the county's current growth trends. As I mentioned earlier, another project that we have underway is a study of our incentive zoning. This is looking at the bonus point systems for public benefits for projects, development proposals in the commercial, residential, and employment zones. This sort of mechanism, these bonus point system was created back in 2011. And this is really the first time that we're going back and actually looking at how it's been used over these years, what types of public benefits have been provided by development projects that receive bonus points for them for additional density. And so, if the Civic Federation is interested in learning a lot more about this, I'm sort of just giving you a little bit of highlights. We're happy to come back and talk more about it. We've done quite a bit of data analysis so far, and but we're continuing to work on this project to come up with some recommendations to make some updates. So among the project goals are to identify best practices and to recommend actionable changes to the policy while ensuring the balance between public benefits required, the cost of development, and the county's goals. So again, we're looking to modernize the point system, make sure that it's set up to serve the county's needs and priorities as they exist now. We also want to make sure that they are, again, in alignment with the priorities from Thrive Montgomery 2050, the county's climate action plan, as well as the county's racial equity law, which was passed in 2019. And we also want to develop clear standards to effectively maximize the positive impact of public benefits. So again, please let us know if you're interested in, hearing more about this project as we continue to work on it. And as Chair Harris noted, we are laser focused on implementing Thrive Montgomery 2050. And what I like to say when I'm often asked, how are you implementing it? We're implementing Thrive through all of our work, through all of our master plans, through the studies that I just noted, as well as our approach to development review. And so this is really, will continue to be our sort of roadmap for the coming years that will guide all of our planning work. I also wanted to share, kind of switching gears and to talking a little bit about development review. Chair Harris talked about, Montgomery Planning's participation in development review process work group. There are a number of recommendations from that work group that are under the charge of the planning department. And so we are going to be sitting down once we get the report out by the end of this week, along with the rest of the work group. We're going to be sitting down and creating a game plan for how we will address a number of those recommendations. There's some efforts that we've already been doing, but we, again, are looking for further opportunities to continue to streamline this process and to make sure that, again, the county ends up with projects that will serve the community, that will meet the goals of our master plans, and will be, overall benefits to us. But again, sort of related to this, we actually created a development dashboard that pulls data from our Development Activity Information Center, which is already on our website. And these dashboards show, this is actually a couple of dashboards. We have an approvals dashboard that shows data on base plans approved from 2010, to the present. And so what you see here is a screenshot of residential commercial approvals, and I'm happy to send the link around, or you can go to the link as shown here and play around with it. There's quite a lot of data there. And then we also have a review times dashboard that has data on review times at all the different stages and different types of review and different types of applications going back to 2018. So I want to switch gears and talk about how important equity is for all of our work. As you all know, the Montgomery County is a very diverse county in terms of race and ethnicity. If you look at the bar chart on the left, that shows the changes between 1960 and 2020, and the proportion of different racial and ethnic groups in the county. And looking at 1960, the county was predominantly white. But now or more recently in 2020, which was the last decennial census data, the county is much more diverse and is almost 60% people of color, as well as about 1/3 residents who immigrated from other countries. If you look at the map on the right, this is a representation of where those different racial and ethnic groups live in a county, but just spatially represented. And the thing I'd really like to highlight is the yellow areas. That means that there is no predominant group, no one racial and ethnic group that make up more than 50% of the residents who live in those parts of the county. And you can see that it's quite a distribution across the county. And so again, fundamentally, we have to focus on equity because these are the residents that we serve. This is the future of our county, and we want to make sure that everyone's future will be vibrant and that they can thrive into the future. And I'll talk a bit more about how we are focusing on that. Another tool that I definitely encourage you all to take a look at is a GIS story map that we created that shows the trends in racial and ethnic diversity in Montgomery County between 1990 and 2020. So basically, if you look at the sort of cited charts that I just showed you, this kind of goes, the story map goes to a much more deeper level, much more, tells multiple stories in a sense that it shows where different racial and ethnic groups have lived in a county over multiple decades. And so I just have some screenshots here, one at the top that shows the Hispanic population in kind of covering up, I think it's probably in the 1980s, and then in 2020. And then you can see how the Hispanic population has grown significantly in a county, not just in terms of numbers, but where in a county these residents have lived. And again, this is definitely a really great story map that has a lot of data, a lot of information. It really helps to tell the story about how the county has become more diverse over the recent decades. So again, this understanding of who are the residents that we serve are absolutely critical. And they inform this major initiative that the planning department has had underway since 2020. This is our equity and planning agenda. And this is really important because, fundamentally, we as planners, and I'm including myself, recognize that the planning profession in previous decades and even into the present has helped to create through previous land use decisions, segregated communities, communities where residents did not, whether Black residents, Hispanic residents, and others did not receive the same benefits and amenities as other residents. And so this has really created a number of inequitable conditions that we are still living with and still see today. And we have to make sure that all the work that we do as planners now and into the future will both address those previous inequities, but also make sure that we are not creating new inequities with the decisions that are being made now. And this is really a major focus very much for our planning department, but also nationally in the planning profession. And so as part of our equity agenda for planning, again, back in 2020, we created a framework document that really laid out a number of action items for how we will make sure that equity serves as a foundation for all of our planning work. We shared that framework and got the approval of the planning board. And since then, we've been implementing it. And so we have quite a number of ongoing efforts, including, and this is sort of very broad, but applying an equity lens for master plans that covers a lot of different things that we do to make sure that each of our master plans, particularly our sector plans, but even our countywide plans, make sure that we have a grounding in equity and that we're applying that lens through our data analysis, through our demographic analysis, through identification of issues and challenges that the master plans need to address. One example is for our countywide pedestrian master plan, we use our equity focus areas mapping, which I will talk about in a little bit, and to identify the parts of the county where those EFAs existed, and then overlaid pedestrian crash data to see if there were any particular patterns. And what we saw was that in those areas where, in the equity focused areas, we typically or often saw more frequent pedestrian crashes that cause injuries or fatalities. And so because of that, the pedestrian master plan has a particular focus on making sure that its recommendations address equity. We also apply a wide variety of equitable community engagement strategies, and I'll talk about that in more detail. We have an internal equity peer review group. This is an internal committee of staff who are both diverse in terms of race and ethnicity, as well as their planning expertise areas, and they serve as sort of an extra set of eyes and brains to help advise the project managers for our plans in reviewing the scope of master plans, the community engagement strategies that they're using, draft recommendations to make sure that we are remaining laser focused on equity. And then more operationally across our department, we have about 150 employees. We require annual 8 hours of equity training annually for all of our employees. That is actually part of their evaluation, because we want to make sure that it's not just sort of a one-time thing, they get training, but that this is an ongoing training, ongoing skills, an ongoing sort of deepening understanding of equity and racial equity, and to make sure that they can continue to apply that to their work. And as part of our equity agenda, we've also completed several tools and initiatives. Our equity focus areas mapping, which I will talk about a bit. I just talked about our trends in racial equity, our trends in racial and ethnic diversity story map. We also completed a neighborhood change analysis in Washington, D.C. region that looked across the region to help to identify parts of the region, including in Montgomery County, that experience gentrification, displacement, or low income concentration, or more inclusive growth. We also, earlier this year, completed our mapping segregation project, that phase 1 of that, which focused on within the down county or in the down county area, essentially inside the Beltway. We did research to identify where racially restrictive covenants for housing properties existed in that part of the county. And so we actually have that map now, and have our historic preservation office led that effort, and we have a number of findings that came out of that effort, as well as a really informative report. And again, if this group would be interested in hearing about that topic, happy to talk about that. And then one of our latest tools that we just completed is our Community Equity Index, which I will talk about later. So again, community engagement is absolutely critical to the success of creating plans that will serve the community into the future, and they must be equitable. The plans must be equitable, but in order for that to happen, the community engagement strategies that we use also has to be equitable, and the process itself has to be equitable in terms of public participation. And so we have multiple strategies for community engagement, multiple tools in our toolbox. There is no one way of doing equitable community engagement. There's no one set of tools. It's very much, sometimes it's dependent upon a particular community where we're doing a plan. In other cases, for countywide plans, we leverage a lot of different tools. But again, this is just some examples of how we do equitable community engagement. One big piece of that is that, coming out of the pandemic, we did do virtual community meetings in order to continue community engagement during that time. And as you all know, and we're in a virtual meeting tonight, virtual meetings are a really great way to be able to reach even more people. And so a standard practice that we have now for all of our plans is to do both in-person and virtual community meetings at every stage. So if you go to an in-person meeting and then go to a virtual meeting, they will have the exact same content. And that way we can make sure we can reach as many people as possible. We also have done virtual meetings in other languages. For Thrive Montgomery 2050, I remember we did a virtual meeting that was in Spanish with English language translation. And for the Great Seneca Plan earlier this year, we worked with a Chinese American community organization and did a meeting that was in Chinese with English translation to be able to engage those residents. We also use pop-ups in communities. We attend community events. We put on placemaking festivals. For example, for the Fairland and Briggs Cheney Master Plan, we did a placemaking festival right out in the parking lot that's right outside of the community recreation center there, and use that as a way to both kind of create a vision of what could exist there in terms of new community amenities, but really it was an opportunity for a lot of fun for residents, a lot of fun activities, but we also use that as a way to engage residents and to get their ideas about the future of that community for the master plan. We also leverage online questionnaires a lot in English and in other languages. And there's an example of one that was in Amharic. We also have done canvassing of residents who live in apartment buildings. We've done that now for multiple plans, and that's another really, really great way to reach residents, particularly renters, and residents who don't come to community meetings. And my experience as a planner working in this field for over 20 years now is that not everyone is going to come to a community meeting. So we have to make sure we use as many different resources as possible. We also translate materials into multiple languages on a regular basis. We use bus shelter ads, we use yard signs, text messaging, postcards was something that was mentioned to me earlier as an effective strategy that we use, for instance, for the pedestrian master plan. We've also used that, for other plans as well, particularly countywide ones like Thrive Montgomery 2050, where we also use that. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about our equity focus areas. Again, this is one of our mapping tools that we have used and have applied to our master plans, both countywide and sector plans. And equity focus areas, this is actually sort of a Montgomery County tailored version of a tool that the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments created, which is equity emphasis areas. But for the Montgomery County equity focus areas, these are parts of the county where we have a majority of residents who are in low-income households, who are people of color and speak English less than very well. And so you can see that represented on this map. And we've also, looked at the data and compared, for instance, educational attainment levels, household income levels against countywide averages. And again, this is one of our newest tools. This is our Community Equity Index. And I'm really kind of just showing you a teaser. I'm happy to come back and talk more in more depth about this new tool. This is sort of taking the EFAs to sort of another level. Whereas with the EFAs, there are parts of the county that is either an EFA or is not. Whereas the Community Equity Index is really looking at not just the parts of the county where you have a particularly strong focus on equity is really, really needed, because you have residents who are dealing with aspects of their lives or their environment that make equitable outcomes more challenging. This is really looking at the entire county and looking at metrics such as household income, housing tenure in terms of whether homeowners or renters, educational attainment, and applying a complex methodology that our data team can explain in more detail, and then identifying which parts of the county fall within this range from highly disproportionate disadvantage to highly disproportionate advantage. We do have a GIS tool that accompanies this as well. Again, you can go into the tool and click on a particular area, and it can break down those metrics even more and kind of peel back what this sort of overarching map is really telling you. So again, this is really a teaser. We can talk more about it, but I definitely encourage you all to explore the tool, and I'm happy to send a link to that. So that concludes my presentation. Here's my contact information. And again, very, very happy to be here tonight with you all. And let me stop sharing my screen. There we go. I think I'm finished. Okay. So with that, happy to help answer any questions.
Okay, I'm going to try to group the questions and categorize them in terms of scope. And speaking of scope, the complexity and the scope of what your department does is impressive and mystifying at the same time. And it's quite difficult often for residents to understand what is happening before things are finalized, and residents not only feel that they have no input, but they have been completely unaware of what's going on. One of the questions I wanted to start with is Thrive Montgomery 2050 is the overarching new general plan. It establishes a whole new set of assumptions which haven't changed anything yet, but are likely to do so. Can you, it's to most of us like me, I've been really paying attention to this for the last several years, but I don't know or understand how master planning and sector planning work. And can you give us like the Cliff Notes version of how Thrive will affect master and sector plans, and how the community can become aware and involved at crucial points in the process?
Certainly. Let me, I'll use the Fairlane and Briggs Cheney master plan maybe as a way to help explain the relationship between Thrive and master plans. So actually I'll just kind of start more generally. So Thrive Montgomery 2050 is a general plan, and you probably hear that often, but what that means is a general plan is also sometimes called a comprehensive plan. That's what they're called in DC. They're called that in some other parts of Maryland. Those types of plans serve as an overarching high-level policy document. It lays out the policy direction that will guide future planning, but it does not do the very sort of on-the-ground technical things that a sector plan or area master plan will do. So for example, Thrive Montgomery 2050 has a very important concept called complete communities, which is about making sure that we can have communities where residents can access services, jobs, retail, housing, in closer proximity to where they live, so that they don't have to drive a half an hour or further in order to get to those amenities. That concept then gets translated into an area master plan, and I will use the Fairland Briggs Cheney master plan as an example. I don't have my slide deck for that plan, but essentially for the Fairland and Briggs Cheney community, you take that concept and then look at different parts of that community to identify where are there opportunities to support either future redevelopment or new amenities that can bring more retail options closer to those residents, that can improve or strengthen the transit infrastructure that already exists so that they can get to jobs more easily. How can we create more linkages to existing parks from the residents who live in the residential areas, who now, because of previous decisions, have to go a long way just in order to access a park or a stream valley that is actually very close to their home. That's sort of one way to look at it. So if you take these concepts that are in Thrive, and then in an area master plan, you look at the particular context and the particular needs and conditions in that community, and you come up with recommendations for what that concept can actually look like in that particular community. In terms of community engagement, again, we absolutely encourage community engagement at every stage of the planning process, both during a time when the planning department is leading it, and absolutely, as Chair Harris noted earlier, during the planning board's process. We have multiple ways in which we do our engagement for particular plans, but we also have e-newsletters for our plans. We have one for our department as well. We have a wealth of information on our website, and I know it's a lot, and maybe a lot to digest, but I definitely encourage you all to sign up for those newsletters so that you can definitely get those updates. Definitely keep an eye on planning board agendas, because obviously, in addition to the regulatory applications, we bring all of our planning projects to them as well. And we don't just bring them to them when we have a working draft plan that's ready to start the official public review process. For example, the board just last week got a briefing on the existing conditions analysis for the University Boulevard corridor plan. We're still in the middle of doing that plan, but we've already done a lot of community engagement. So they also talked about what we did for that, but talked about the conditions on the ground. And that actually helps to prepare the board for when we give them this big plan with all these recommendations. We've already done some preparatory work to help, get them acclimated. So those are just some different opportunities. Again, honestly, if you have questions, reach out to us. You reach out to me, reach out to our staff. We are very much about, and it's very much a priority of mine, that we be responsive to residents. If we can't answer a question, we will. If we have to refer it to somebody else, we will do that. But definitely feel free to reach out to us if you want to learn more about any of our projects.
That's really intriguing. We really appreciate that, because we need to have that connection. Remember when the internet was one way, it was just like a bulletin board, and now we went up to 2.0 and beyond. People feel a need for a different kind of engagement. For example, the kind of engagement that you get in focus groups. For example, the racial equity study that was done in late 2022, the interviews that were done with the community, the kind of focus that you've been talking about, were truly engaging. You got a whole group of recommendations from the residents who also had not been heard from before because they work and because they can't come to meetings at night, because they're sometimes working two jobs. That's the kind of engagement that we certainly would encourage. And someone mentioned in one of the questions that in DC, they have advisory neighborhood councils, and they have a genuine impact on the planning process. Whereas in Montgomery County, we don't have anything like that. And people are left to their own devices or each individual community association. And people are really pining for more active engagement. That's why, for example, the Civic Federation has been hoping that the council would approve an Office of the People's Council, not to represent individuals at all, but to explain the process to people so that they would understand it, and they would actually be an ally of the planning department and of the residents to educate them. And as the previous director said, that kind of thing really helped people understand the process and smoothed it from both ends. And we're just hoping that the council and the planning board will be open to that kind of thing, because people often feel quite removed and marginalized, not that it's at all your intention, but because they just don't seem to think that they have any say in the whole thing. Particularly, I'm interested in to what you can tell us about the racial equity lens, because you know that there has been a lot of back and forth about that. The Office of Legislative Oversight had some serious concerns, not only about Thrive, but about also the absence of the Office of the People's Council. And we would be very curious to know how you apply this racial equity lens, which is so important because we are a majority minority county.
Sure. So there's a lot of different ways that we apply that lens. And, again, there is no one way to do it. And there's no sort of, you write it. And frankly, it's not even a matter of you write a chapter or a section that talks about equity in a plan and you're done. You have to do more than that. I will give another example with the Silver Spring Downtown Adjacent Communities Plan that the County Council approved last year. As part of looking at sort of some of the early part of the work that you do with the master plan is you do an existing conditions analysis, and you also look at the history of that area. And as part of that plan, our historic preservation team looked at the history of Silver Spring, not just in terms of potential historic preservation of buildings, but the actual sort of history of how Silver Spring kind of grew and changed. And part of their analysis talked about there was a history of housing segregation or housing discrimination and segregation, particularly in the 50s and 60s in Silver Spring. And there was, in response to that, a very strong protest movement against that. There was even a Beltway march against, housing discrimination. And so our master plan was able to articulate and to talk about that history, which, frankly, was new to me. And one thing I forgot to mention earlier as part of my introduction, I'm a native Washingtonian, third generation native Washingtonian. DC is my hometown. I have family who live in this region. I've lived and worked in different parts of this region. And, that type of history, I wasn't surprised by it, but I didn't know that happened. But we now have the opportunity to unearth that history and to share that, to make sure that we don't forget about that type of history, those types of histories in communities, because it very much, ultimately affects, again, what we tend to see on the ground. Another way that we've applied that lens, I talked about earlier with the pedestrian master plan, of using the parts of the county that are EFAs, and then overlaying the crash data, the pedestrian crash data, and doing a data analysis to see, are these residents particularly vulnerable to these types of crashes? We found out yes. Are there particular corridors where we're seeing that? Yes. Are there particular sort of conditions where you may see these types of crashes more frequently? So it's really, so those are just kind of two examples. And then in the recommendations themselves, that's where you can articulate a recommendation that speaks more specifically to whatever the particular focus is in terms of addressing inequities and making sure that we can create more equitable communities in the future. So that's what I mean. It's sort of, it's not one thing, it's not two things, is you have to apply it in a lot of different ways. And another way, obviously, is equitable engagement. I know you talked a bit about the focus groups that the council did with Thrive. I do want to mention that we also did a lot of that type of engagement while we were doing Thrive Montgomery 2050. We did talk with residents of color. We did go to smaller groups. There was one event that I attended that was a culmination of some engagement that we did with high school students that were all diverse, and they actually made sort of a mini film as part of a summer program that they were in, and then they had their own panel discussion, and we asked them. They were asked, you know, what are your ideas about some of these issues that we, you know, ultimately could address through Thrive. So, you know, again, this is what I mean by we have a toolbox. There are multiple strategies. There's no one way. And in order to really address equity, you have to apply it at every different part of the planning process at different stages.
That's very intriguing. Can you give us an example of a time or an incident in which you altered your strategy significantly as a result of engagement from the community?
I'm trying to think of a specific example. Well, I think, how would I put it? When we start master plans, now I'll focus particularly on sector plans, on area master plans. The first part of community engagement is listening. We did that for Thrive as the general plan, but we also do that for area master plans, where we go to the community and, you know, we talk sort of very generally about this is the scope of this plan. We did this more recently, for example, with the Clarksburg Gateway Plan. We did a community kickoff meeting about a month or so ago. And then it's really more, we had stations that had, you know, data and information or different topics. And we basically asked residents to share your ideas, share your feedback. What are your concerns? What are you looking for? What do you think is needed here? And some of the things that we heard there, for example, was, you know, a really strong need for more retail, for more community amenities. A lot of housing was built there, but that part of the puzzle for their community was still missing, and that they had to go to other areas in order to get that. When I went to the kickoff meeting for the University Boulevard Corridor Plan, pedestrian safety was a major focus of what we heard there. So that actually, we do those listening sessions because that actually helps us to identify what are the particular issues that we need to address in the plans. But as we are going through the different phases, and particularly, for instance, as we're starting to draft the recommendations, we share preliminary recommendations with community members before we actually, you know, write the working draft and plan, the full draft plan, and give it to the board. So that's another way for us to say, okay, here's what we heard, here's what we've identified as the key issues that should be addressed. Here are the recommendations that we've developed based on what we've heard, our data analysis, best practices and planning. You know, what do you all think about this before we actually, you know, produce the working draft plan? So there's all these steps along the way to make sure that we're checking in with residents. And if we are hearing things that are of major concern, then we will have to address that one way or the other. The one thing, though, I do want to really highlight, and this is something that I do like to remind people, is that there is no one community voice. We oftentimes will hear multiple perspectives from community members, even within the same community. And so we also have to balance out the varying perspectives that we're hearing in order to, you know, figure out what recommendation to move forward with.
Okay, before I go on to the environment, and other big questions, a couple of nuts and bolts questions. Will the slides be available to us?
Yes, I can share this.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you. And also, some people, and I'm pretty sure that you all are captives of the county when it comes to teams, but some people have asked, is there any way you can switch to Zoom, because that is more comfortable for many people? We will sympathize with whatever your answer is on that.
We could take that into consideration.
That would be awesome. We would really appreciate it. There are a number of questions about the environment. We've got several questions about what can you do to reduce the amount of synthetic materials in building, particularly in the parks, and also to reduce the amount of the number of invasive plants that are in park areas. And I'll start with those because those are a couple of the questions that came up.
Those questions really apply to Montgomery Park, so I can't really speak to those. I don't know if Chair Harris wants to speak to them.
Yeah.
My cat just jumped on my desk, so that's why I was putting him on the floor.
Yeah. I'll bring these questions back to the Parks Department, but I know that Director Riley is. I saw a question about synthetic fuels. I know he is more and more going to natural fields. Right, they're definitely, if you look at the Hillendale field, that's all grass. You look at the one in the Blair, it's grass. I mean, they're more expensive, and he's doing some research on, he's working several years on how to get, a less intensive maintenance intensive grass field. Has been working with some nurseries and stuff. So we're trying to move to grass as much as possible, and you'll see that in the newer fields. So we are trying to get away from turf fields to grass fields. And I had asked the other day in our office about, and if you look at the planning department, and parks, definitely planning is always recommending non-invasives, native plants, right? That's if you look at all of our material, it's all about that. And parks are more and more trying to go to that. It is, as I said, we have 37,000 acres of parks, and anything new we're moving toward, non-invasives and natives. And we're trying to go back and Mike will give more information on that, but do our best to as we looked at old parts of parks to make them up to today's what our environmental standards. But there's a lot of parks, and they're really trying. And I don't have the piece with volunteers. We have thousands of volunteers that help us in the park system, and we're really trying to create what people want: environmentally sensitive parks.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question from the chat, and then I'm going to open it up for people just to raise their questions, because there are so many, and I really don't want to overlook everybody. People are very concerned about the infrastructure that is currently being built. The number of buildings, the amount of development that's taking place currently, and whether or not there's enough infrastructure for it: public safety, the schools, the sewer and water, and everything that is needed to make this community what it is purported to be and has a reputation for being. Now, I know that's an extraordinarily extensive question, but what would you say to people who are terribly concerned that their neighborhoods are going to be overwhelmed by extensive development without enough infrastructure?
Well, that's really, as you know, the county has an adequate public facilities ordinance. And as I mentioned earlier, this is really what the growth and infrastructure policy is intended to do, which again, it has guidelines for evaluating the adequacy of infrastructure as part of, each development application. And if there are particular deficiencies, looking to address that. And this is really what the board uses as part of, we use it in terms of our analysis. We work with county agencies, MCDOT, absolutely, and evaluated transportation adequacy. For the schools capacity piece, there's an entire section of the GIP that talks about that, how it's evaluated, and the different strategies to address it. Whether it's obviously the county has impact taxes for schools and for transportation, but there's also utilization premium payments, which is something that was new as part of the 2020 update, where as part of looking at school enrollment capacity and what additional enrollment numbers a new development may add to schools. If that school, I'm not the expert on it, but I'm going to try to explain it. If an infected school is essentially over capacity, if that application of the applicant wants to move forward with that project, they have to pay additional money, an additional payment to help support schools to be able to address capacity and future enrollment. So those are just some different examples, but this to me is a really good reason why we definitely encourage residents to watch the growth and infrastructure policy update, to get involved. It is partly a very technical type of project. It's not like a master plan. We will be using a couple of technical advisory teams to help us with the transportation and the schools piece, but we will be doing community engagement. And so I highly, highly encourage you all to go sign up for those updates and to be involved as we're doing those projects. We already have a lot of information on our website about the existing growth and infrastructure policy and how that helps the planning board ultimately determine and make sure, and it's actually not just the planning board, but also other agencies, again, like MCDOT and others, to make sure that as development continues into the future, that the infrastructure will be in place to support it.
Okay, and as I say, I'm really happy we're going to take questions now because I don't want to ignore anyone, but I will ask everyone to be very succinct in the way you ask your questions. Ask a question, please. Don't present your viewpoint on the Encyclopedia Britannica because we want to give everybody equal time. So, Ms. McFarland, would you start?
Yes, thank you. My question, as it appears in the chat, is about Jessup Blair Park and the historic house that resides in Jessup Blair Park. And the question I asked is why, after 15 years of talking about it, Parks and Planning are still at an outreach stage on it. And there are a number of community groups that have coalesced and folks who have coalesced around some very specific ideas for using the house and activating the park. But other parks just seem to be getting ahead of Jessup Blair, and nothing underlying 3 times has happened on this amazing 15-acre asset. And I think, there has been a proposal that, the Parks and Planning has had an RFP kind of approach that they will issue an RFP and find what I would describe as kind of a sugar daddy who will renovate it and put it to some use. But my specific question is about why are we still at an outreach stage on Jessup Blair Park?
So that would be a question. Thank you. That would be a question from Montgomery Parks. So I can't answer that.
Yeah, but I will say, Ms. McFarland, that we will get back to you on it, but that's something on my radar, and I promise we will be getting back to you soon. Okay.
Okay, Jill Teitelbaum.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Liz. And thank you, Chairman Harris and Department
Director.
Department Director Acting Stern. My question addresses your policy statement, Chairman Harris. I noticed what was missing in there, and it was to my surprise, was any mention of a priority on preserving existing affordable housing. I live in the greater Littonsville area. We have several apartment complexes that are subsidized and others that are naturally affordable. And we know there's some of the naturally affordable ones are slated for takeover by other for-profit operations who want to build upscale housing. And we see that the subsidized housing, for example, the so-called friendly garden, has had a fire and 41 households were displaced. And that was 2 years ago. Nothing has been done to repair or upgrade or replace that housing. And I'm sure that's true elsewhere with fire, flood, and so on. What is your priority for preserving the overwhelming amount of existing affordable housing of all kinds in this county? And does it equal the accelerated new production priority? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question, Mr. Tittlebob. So I was focusing on things that we have a direct control over. The Department of Housing and Community Affairs has a bigger control over preserving existing, but I will tell you that I am for preserving existing housing, and that was my goal, and that's what I did at the Montgomery Housing Partnership. Before I left, my team purchased the Rolling Wood Terrace apartments on Ross Road, right in your hometown of Littensville. It's a 283 unit property, an older property that was owned by Federal Realty, and that property, MHP is going to rehab that property. They're putting in it for tax credits. So yes, I am preserving existing affordable houses is dear to my heart. And then what I understand about the Friendly Gardens is that the owner that owner is partnering with EYA to redevelop that. They keep at least the same amount of units that will be new plus some townhouse units there. So it is a goal of mine. I was talking more about the things I directly control. So I'll leave it at that. But yes, preserving existing housing is important. But I will say this, even as a affordable housing provider, many of the existing older housing stock, maybe 20 years ago, you could easily rehab them at a nominal cost, but many of them were built, in the 50s and 60s. So that would make them 60 and 70 years old. To rehab those is very, very expensive. And that's why you see even a lot of the affordable housing providers buying some of the older and redeveloping them, because it is just very, 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 very expensive to rehab some of the older ones, like the one. So I'll leave it at that. But yes, preserving affordable housing is also very important.
As a follow-up, just to say, I agree with you, and I really appreciate your personal commitment to preserving quality, affordable housing. And I'd like to see that disseminated through the planning board and the planning department, where we do not see that approach. They want new and accelerated growth and all that kind of thing. They pay no attention to the ability of the planning board and department to actually intervene through master plans in making affordable housing persistent and affordable. Thank you.
Can I just respond in saying that I have to disagree with you in terms of whether or not this is a priority for the planning department. It is absolutely a priority for us. It is a major goal that is in Thrive Montgomery 2050, which talks about not only creating new housing, but the preservation and a provision of affordable housing, as well as naturally occurring affordable housing. The planning department also, back in, I think it was 2020, 2021, we completed a preservation of affordable housing study that looked at existing subsidized housing as well as existing NOAA housing in the county, identify where those units are, how old those buildings are, did quite a deep analysis. And also that study includes a number of recommendations for how to preserve both subsidized affordable and naturally occurring affordable housing. So just, and we're happy to share that again with the Civic Federation, but just want to say that we're absolutely on the same page in terms of this being a priority as with the chair.
And I want to thank you both for enunciating that, because as you probably know, the former, shall we say, planning board chair did not share your points of view, nor did the former planning director. And we appreciate your newfound attention and concern about preserving affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Carrie Lamari.
Mr. Harris, thank you for giving us the presentation, and you too, Tanya, Ms. Stern. Okay, to get back to Liz's point about residents across the county feeling concerned that growth will overwhelm and potentially devastate the infrastructure capacity. I've been involved in several master plans. I was on, a couple of master plan advisory boards, and I've developed some property myself throughout the years. Who can forget the Fed committee and Mr. Reimer and Mr. Giwando stating unequivocally that simply because infrastructure is in a master plan or in a CIP, that it may not ever get built. The fact of the matter is we have limited resources. What we are guaranteed is the density will be built, because that's not in the hands of the developer. So to get back to Liz's point, there is a real concern from the public that if we're not cautious on how we implement our strategies and our plans, that we can become overwhelmed. And you mentioned complete communities. The Office of Legislative Oversight gave their best guesstimate, and the cost is absolutely amazing to build these complete communities. So in totality, we have to be extremely cautious. In my opinion, Thrive did not establish the guardrails necessary to be able to support the additional density, along with the necessary infrastructure and schools, et cetera, to support that density.
So is your question, what are the guardrails? I think that's what you're getting at, right?
Right.
You want to ask a question.
What kind of guardrails are there
against being overwhelmed?
Well, I'd like Mr. Harris to answer that, if you don't mind, Tanya. I appreciate. I've heard you speak.
Carrie, please let them answer. They just wanted you're asking them what guardrails are in place, and that's what we would like them to address.
Yeah. So I'll say this, and Dr. Stern can chime in as needed. Well, the Thrive focuses on where we want to see growth, and we feel that there's infrastructure in general there for that growth. And each plan, as we talked about, we look at adequate public facilities. Is there school capacity? Is there sewer capacity? Is there water capacity? Is there transportation? And we like to focus our developers in most of it where there is those things in place: transportation, water, sewer, school. And as we see that they're more needed, we talked about in terms of school capacity, we are charging more once the schools get to a certain capacity, so we have money to build more schools. So we are thinking through this. We believe in a long-term view, and all of this development, even when their master plans upgraded, or it doesn't happen overnight, it takes time. So we're looking, these plans are made for the long term. They're not, once something is approved, all that development happens at once.
Well, thank you. Jerry Garson?
Why is the peak traffic on the Beltway westbound near New Hampshire Avenue on most weekdays between 5 and 6 a.m.? Is this adequate public facilities that after 6 a.m. we'd start diverting the traffic onto local roads?
Well, we can certainly take a look at that. I don't have an answer for you right now, but if you'd like to share the question with us, be happy to follow up.
Thank you. I've got a question for Chairman Harris, who's got a lot of experience in building and housing. My question is, the type and quantity of affordable housing that we need for teachers, first responders, and workers not likely to be built by developers. Deeply affordable housing needs to be deeply subsidized. What kinds of research is being pursued by the planning department for this type of deeply affordable housing for teachers, police officers, and workers?
Yeah, so that is a good question. And yes, at very, very, very deep levels, it needs to be, I think the government needs to come in and subsidize very, very low levels, or through what we did at Montgomery Housing Partnership was through low-income housing tax credits that's at the federal level. So between some of the things the county can put in, some of the things that the federal level can put in, and that's where I believe you get your deepest affordability. But the things that private developers can do is that right now the MPDU law says 15%, just say 15% of the units, and they really focus on 70% AMI resident. Those are for like mid-rise buildings. I think a good idea would be to still keep the 15%, but allow a sliding scale so that they all don't have to be at 70% AMI. That some could be at 50, some at 70, and some at 80, so that it has no deeper impact on the private developers, so they're still willing to build those buildings, but just have a different sliding scale on the affordability, so that you can make some of those units that at 70, at 50, then that would provide housing for teachers and firefighters and for working class workforce housing residents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl Gannon?
Yep, thanks, Liz. Several years ago, Mayor Muriel Bowser announced that the income restricted affordable housing would be built in every ward of DC. And I am concerned when I see things like missing middle housing coming down in Chevy Chase Lake and Bethesda, being replaced with expensive housing. And then Gwen Wright said that HOAs and incorporated towns are going to be left out of attainable housing because of lawsuits and that whole ball of wax. And then you have mini plans going on. Places like Tacoma Park has a red line station, but they have only a mini plan going in place. And as you start exempting more and more areas, River Road outside the Beltway is now going to be exempt. I bet there's a lot of teachers and public employees and police officers that work out there that would like to live out there, actually. But as you exempt more and more and more, it just puts more pressure on a smaller number of areas to absorb all the affordable housing. And so before anyone misinterprets me, I have been working with the church in my neighborhood in Woodside that's going to build 100% income restricted housing. I support that and I'm helping them. I also support the plan at the place at the 16th and East West Highway. They want a redevelopment. I think it's Falkland Chase to 100% income restricted. But I do think that we have to ask everyone to contribute something toward this, or we'll never meet the 70% Council of Governments guidelines, particularly if we're going to try to do it at 12.5% in some of these areas. So I guess my question to you is, how are you going to bring genuine equity in which everyone contributes to the building of affordable housing?
Certainly. And one thing I will say, for instance, with the Tacoma Park Minor Master Plan Amendment, which I think is what you were referring to, that does not sort of exempt part of Tacoma Park. It's a master plan that's focusing on a particular part of Tacoma Park, but there's actually already an existing master plan that covers a larger area. But to get to your specific question, we are actually, let me take a step back. So the planning department supported the development of these are regional housing targets through the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments back in 2019. And as part of that, Montgomery County has a housing target. And we are now working with the Planning, Housing and Parks Committee of the County Council to take that sort of larger countywide housing target and developing localized housing targets for both housing production as well as affordable housing targets throughout the county, because we very much have the perspective that residents should be able to access housing that's affordable to them, whether it's subsidized affordable housing or housing that is affordable to more housing for other residents. you should be able to access that throughout the county in the PHP committee. But as part of that, we took there are 22 planning areas and have already drafted some different methodologies, but some draft numbers. They're not final numbers, so don't, take those as final. But for all 22 planning areas throughout the county, with the exception of essentially the agricultural reserve, they all have or would get some type of more localized housing target in terms of production as well as affordable housing. And so that is very much the approach that our department supports and that the county council, is looking to apply. And we definitely also look at that as part of our master plans as well in different parts of the county.
Yeah, yes, I understand, and I think that's a great, I agree with you that all communities should have a range of housing types and a range of housing for every community. That would be very, very accurate.
This is very heartening. I want to actually throw in a couple more questions and then wrap it up, because you have just been so generous with your time. And also it is heartening that you are both very data-driven and aware of facts and respectful of them. For example, all over the country, things are happening. For example, Minneapolis passed a plan that may be what we would do in Montgomery County, and it was overturned by the courts after being passed for several years because of environmental issues. And I'm not going to ask you how you're going to prevent this, but I'm going to just say, put this on your radar screen. And one very interesting question, and I'm going to stop now. One of the things that we don't understand is that we know that there's a great need for more housing, but there are about depending on whose numbers you take, between 35,000 and 45,000 units that have been approved in the county and are not being built. And the holders of these permits are just sitting on them. Would you be open to consider, putting an expiration date on these approvals so that if the owners of them do not build within a certain amount of time, then they would be turned back to the county as a value and have other people have the option of taking them up?
So I think you're referring to not so much permits, because we don't do permitting, but certified site projects, proposals or sites to have certified site plans. They do actually have sort of expiration dates on them for approvals for the adequate public facilities authorization. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but they actually do have expiration dates on them. And so if they don't move forward after a certain time period, that the adequate public facilities authorization will expire. And so that means that if that happens, then whoever wants to do something on that site will have to start all over again.
Okay, we'd be very interested in knowing what that is, because this is just, there's a cloud over this issue. We don't understand the details. Leanne, one more before and don't make a liar out of me, everybody else, but Leanne Tobias, what's your question? Leanne?
Leanne, you're muted.
I'm right here. Thank you both for coming. You've given us some great insights. I'm just wondering, there have been a number of questions on the board about advisory neighborhood commissions, the Office of People's Counsel, perhaps using questionnaires or more broader surveys in order to assess public opinion when it comes time to evaluate sector plans and other types of plans that you might undertake. And my question is, are you at all open to looking at process improvements in order to make the community better engaged and get engaged in a more timely and meaningful way?
Chair Harris, do you want to start with that?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
and you can give
throwing it to
specific.
Artie to
Yes,
start.
we are always interested in ways that we can improve the public approval process and in getting feedback from residents and getting more education of what we're doing out into the public and getting their feedback. We are always interested in improving that process.
How would we
agree.
communicate with you on that then?
You can always reach out to us. You can email me, you can email any of our staff. If you know, we have master planners and staff in different parts of the county. You can always just reach out to us if you have ideas or have some feedback. If there's a community engagement technique that we use that you think could be improved, or if you just have some general ideas, you can always reach out to us. And, you know, certainly just want to reiterate what Chair Harris said. We're always looking for how we can improve how we do community engagement. You know, again, as I noted earlier, we have a whole toolbox of strategies that we use. And even as we apply them, we use multiple strategies, for instance, even for one master plan, we're always learning from that experience. We're always evaluating how it works. Is there something we can do differently? What worked well for in different parts of the county with different residents? So we always have an internal feedback loop that's going on as well. And we're very, you know, happy to hear directly from residents in terms of, you know, your experiences and what you think, you know, what else we could be doing.
Liz,
We really appreciate that. Go ahead.
Liz, let's take one last question from Harriet. And before she asks her question, I just want both of you to know that we've really appreciated the support of your staff over the last several years. I want to give a particular shout out to Eli Glazer, who shepherded the pedestrian master plan through the board process. He joined several of our meetings and was invaluable to our understanding of what the planning department was doing. So we like Eli. Harriet, you have the last question. If that's okay with you, Liz.
Yeah, it's fine.
Oh, well, thank you all, and thank you for being here tonight. I really appreciate your time. I just wanted a quick follow-up question on the APF expiration. It just seems like there really is no real expiration, because what happens is their deadline expires, they apply for an extension, it goes on inevitably. And if you have a list of projects or plans that have actually expired, could you send that to us? Because I really don't think there are that many, if any.
We can certainly follow up, and I can provide you with what information we do have.
Okay, thank you.
Well, just speaking for myself, this has been a wonderful exchange, and we're very grateful to both of you. We appreciate your time, your knowledge, and your openness to us, and we will presume to follow up on this openness and continue to be in contact with you. Thank
Absolutely.
you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. It's our pleasure to be here, and we want this to be a partnership as we move forward in our work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.